Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to have with us Max Knight and to talk about his latest book, Llano Estacado. Max, first of all, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
Max, you are our first guest who grew up in the Canal Zone. So could you tell us about your professional background, growing up in the Canal Zone, your professional background, and what you're doing now?
My dad was in the military for 30 years, and so I was a military brat, and he was assigned to headquarters Southcom in Quarry Heights, Panama. And so I grew up there for the most part. I came back here to Texas in 1966. So I've been living in San Antonio for 60 years now, on and off. But in terms of my career, I went to Texas A&M University, and when I graduated, I also received a commission into the United States Army. I spent 24 years working with missiles, but also I had a secondary specialty that's called Foreign Area Officer Specialist, which means that I knew the language, the culture, the history of a certain country or region, and I would be assigned to that country or region to give my advice to the commanding officer. I did that for 24 years. As I said, I retired. I went to work in San Antonio for RCI Technologies, and I was a manager there for their internal operations. After 5 years, I left there when my mother passed away, and I put in an application for my security clearance to be renewed, although I had retired in 1997 when the attack occurred on the Twin Towers, September the 11th. I wanted to be back involved, so I put in for my security clearance. And while I was waiting for that to come in, I went to work at the Alamo, and I was the first docent to work at the Alamo.
What was it like growing up as a child in the Canal Zone?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. I loved the jungle. The beaches are wonderful. People were wonderful. I actually was assigned there again when I was in the military. I went back for 3 years. I was assigned to the headquarters, but most of my work took place in El Salvador during their civil war.
Let's move forward to the book, Llano Estacado. And I don't know why, but I still remember seventh grade history in the state of Texas, where you learn Texas history, not U.S. history. We learned Texas history first. But one of the first things I learned was Llano Estacado stood for staked plains. And so I'm intrigued by your use of the Llano Estacado as a character. How did you make that part of Texas, which many people think is the most forbidding, a character?
I'll go back to I'm a huge fan of the Western genre, both the literary genre and also the cinematic representation of those books. One of the books was Alan LeMay, The Searchers, and it's also one of my favorite Westerns that was made by John Ford. I had the opportunity with my son, because love classic movies, to actually go to the Turner Classic Movie Festival in Los Angeles, where they were doing or screening a total reprint of The Searchers. And that gave me the idea to write another novel that had a Western background to it. Llano Estacado, the Staked Plains, is where this takes place. It begins up in Fort Griffin. There's a line of frontier forts, of course, that head south and then to the west. But essentially, it's the same kind of a search that is occurring. The main character, his family is killed by the Comanche. There's a Comanche warrior, a chief also, who has his family killed by the United States military. Both are in search of vengeance. Jacob Harker, who is the settler who has his family massacred, sets out to find the Comanche that did the killings and take vengeance on them. Throughout it, he has various encounters that will change his outlook on seeking vengeance, because revenge has a cost. And in fact, both characters, White Knife and Jacob Harker, will come to the same conclusion, that killing in response to killing their family isn't the answer.
There were many reasons to come to Texas in the 19th century. Some were fleeing justice, some were fleeing bad debts, some were fleeing, I wouldn't maybe say love affairs, but perhaps a pregnant woman or two. Some were seeking their fortune. I've always wondered about all of those and perhaps more in the context of the Staked Plains because I never could understand what it was with the Llano Estacado that would attract people. Was it an opportunity to farm? Was it an opportunity to raise livestock? What opportunity took people to that part of Texas as opposed to maybe the Gulf Coast or here we are in the Hill Country or San Antonio or even East Texas or North Texas?
In general, following the end of the Civil War, we're seeing people moving to the West and settling in lands that for generations had belonged to indigenous peoples. They're going there to farm, they're going there to mine, they're cattlemen. All the cattle trails, the Goodnight Trail, and others all lead up through Llano Estacado into New Mexico and beyond. And also, the United States Army had built its frontier forts on the very edge of the Llano Estacado, and they were in search of the Comanche stronghold, which was located in Paladero Canyon. And so that's a reason why they were involved in setting up these forts to protect the settlers that moved there, but also to quell any of the Indian uprisings.
How were you able to chart a journey from vengeance to redemption with your characters?
They go through many different things. Japet Harker, in particular, he sets out thinking that he will find the Comanche that did this to his family, but everyone tells him that he's on a fool's errand. He doesn't know who raided his settlement, his home. And as he goes, he encounters various people along the way. He encounters scalp hunters. As he goes into New Mexico, he encounters Comancheros as well. And in these encounters, obviously, there is fighting between these individuals. Jacob is fighting, in this case, for his life, and he comes to understand that killing doesn't come naturally to him at all. And he does it out of self-protection, survival mode. But as he continues his journey up, he wants to go back home. He has met a woman at Fort Griffin that for the time that he was there, after he buried his wife and two sons, they don't become exactly romantically involved, but she very much has an interest in him and wants him to come back to her. And as he goes through the Llano Estacado leading up towards Tule Canyon, he is really trying to get back to Fort Griffin and continue this relationship with this young lady. Unfortunately, while he is gone, I don't flinch on the violence in the book. And she has been told to stay away from the town of Griffin, which has also been called the Babylon on the Brazos. And she likes to go riding, and she doesn't heed that advice and goes in, and she is sexually assaulted while she's there. The sexual assault affects her mind, and eventually she will require institutionalization. And he finds out about this in a roundabout way. He is actually up at Fort Richardson after returning with a cavalry patrol, and he runs into a Texas Ranger there that is looking for help in pursuing a criminal. And the criminal just happens to be the uncle of the individual who took advantage of this young lady. He doesn't realize that they're talking about her until they identify that she was the daughter of the post commander at Fort Griffin. And when he realizes that, he changes his mind temporarily in that he agrees to go with the Texas Ranger to hunt down this individual. He takes the oath of office to become a Texas Ranger, And once that commitment has ended, when it ends, he is to return back to civilian life. But of course, when he gets into that, he does find that he goes back to Fort Griffin after they have taken care of this outlaw and finds that her mental capacity is such that she is going to have to, she can't take care of herself, and she no longer even really recognizes who he is. So does care about her significantly, greatly. Like I said, they did not have a romantic relationship, but he is coming back to her to try to redeem himself and to make something out of his life after his family has been murdered. He ends up taking her to the Texas State. It was an insane asylum at the time that was not called a psychiatric hospital, but it is the oldest psychiatric hospital in Texas, in Austin, Texas. And he will take her there. And as the book goes on, he gets her institutionalized. And the reason he takes her there is because the treatment of insane individuals during that period was very harsh. They were treated with electrical shock. They were chained to their beds. They were force fed. But he finds out that this particular psychiatric doctor that has gone to the Texas Institute is interested in rehabilitating or working with people on their mental problems. And so he does take her there, but the doctor in the end will tell him that as much as he wants to try to be with her and to help her, that she is beyond his help. She needs professional help, and that what he needs to do in life is to find a purpose in his life now other than her.
I love to talk to other writers about the craft of writing. And so I'd like to explore your craft. So, for instance, do you see this play out in your head like a movie and you're simply recording the action? I believe you're a meticulous researcher. How did you recreate not life on the Llano Estacado, but Comanche life? How do you get to the details for what it's like to be a Comanche? Or do you outline everything and just fill it in? Just tell me about your style.
Yeah, no, I don't outline. I have a general idea, obviously, of what I want to write about, but I do meticulous research on my books. One of the books that I had read in particular about the Comanche is Gwen's book, The Empire of the Summer Moon, which is an excellent discussion of the Comanche life. And so I relied on that and also went through volumes of background information on the Comanche. And prior to this, I had written a book called Palo Duro, which was about the Southwestern Indian Wars. So I had already had the background on the Comanche, the Kiowa, and the Apache. But as a writer, once I start, I'm obviously using events that actually occurred, or I am taking locations that existed and historical figures that actually existed and incorporating them into my story. But I will tell you, I'm not a historian. I'm a storyteller. But to write historical fiction, certainly you have to do the work to have the background to be able to do that. I would call my writing a stream of consciousness. A lot of my thoughts come to me at night. I can't turn my brain off. And then I get up early in the morning to try to remember what came to me and also to write it down. But also, as I go along, if I read things or if I see things that might take the book in a different direction, I use that. And that was part of the reason. Initially, I had intended to have a happy ending between Catherine Preston, the lady who is violated, and him, but I changed in midstream. And because I also came across the information on the Texas State Institution and the doctor that was trying to help people rather than just incarcerate them. So as I go along, just to make a long story short, as I go along, I do on occasion change course. I don't have a set ending until I get there.
The You take on some pretty big themes in this book. We've already mentioned vengeance, redemption. You hinted at love. You've hinted at in family, home, companionship, all conditions, all human conditions that many people recognize. Did it almost sounded like you enjoyed being able to put some of these really big ideas into a specific story that you were telling? Would that be fair?
I think that's fair. I don't know that I set out to do that, but I think as I write and as I create these fictional characters, you humanize them. Obviously, they're not just ink on a piece of paper. They become living, breathing individuals with their desires, their hopes, their dreams, and so that gets put into my book. And I will also tell you, although it did not directly affect this, other than my connection to the movie that I discussed earlier, a lot of my own experiences go into my books. And some characters actually will have traits or instances of things that have happened to me incorporated into their character.
I'd like to turn now to your experience with Stoney Creek Publishing. And how did you first get connected with Stoney Creek? And then tell me about what it was like working with Laura and the team.
Gladly. And this requires a little background as well. I had published Ghostly Bugles, a novel of the Alamo, in 2000, it was 2023. And I had used a publisher out of Lubbock, Texas. That publisher, within a year, went bankrupt. And I had no idea what my legal rights were, what I should be doing. And I didn't really know what to do. So I contacted a colleague and someone that I had worked with before, and that was Christine Hall of Lone Star Literary Life. And she put me in contact with Lauren. I sent the book to him, and he read it, and he decided that it deserved continuation because at the time it was not being printed, it wasn't being distributed. And so it wasn't. You can't just take a book that's already been published with someone and just put your stamp on it. He had to jump through hoops, legal hurdles to make this happen. And that's just the kind of individual that he is. And I would recommend working with Stoney Creek Publishing to any independent author that's looking for a home. I will tell you that his staff, Leslie Barrett and Danielle Acey, are excellent at promoting and marketing the book. And it's a family feel to it versus the publisher that I'd been with before, which were big publishing houses in California and New York. This, for the first time, I felt like I could ask him anything and get an honest answer back. And I have been very excited to be with him this entire time.
And because you were with Stoney Creek, did you publish through Texas A&M University Press?
I published through Hill Country Press, which is an offshoot of Stoney Creek Publishing. Okay. And that was part of what he had to do, was to create this new offshoot in order to publish my book, Ghostly Bugles. And now I have continued working with him in Hill Country Press with Llano Estacado.
I'm just going to read the list of your books to make sure I have them all down for our listeners. Silver Taps, Memoir and Family Legacy, Palo Duro, the Plains Indian Wars, Tarnished Brass about U.S. involvement in El Salvador, and then Ghostly Bugles, fresh insights into the Battle of the Alamo. Could you give us a couple of fresh insights you were able to bring forward in that book?
There's an element of the paranormal in my book, Ghostly Bugles. I had never intended to write a book about the Alamo. I was reacting to a lot of negative press that I had seen that I thought denigrated the people that fought inside the mission, and also advocated forgetting the Alamo, that it was not something that was occurred just for sacrifice and honor, that there were different causes and reasons why the battle happened. And while that is true, I did not see those as a reason you would forget it. In fact, I advocated it in the book for the work that is going on now to revitalize the Alamo Plaza and the construction of the new venues that they have there. I will say that I also believe that you have to tell the story in its entirety, and that means putting it in historical context. I think the battle will always be the linchpin that draws people to San Antonio and to the plaza. But I do think there were other stories to be told. And when I was looking at this, you had 189 known defenders inside the Alamo, named defenders, but there were probably more. There were multiple riders that were sent out to take messages asking for reinforcements. Many of them didn't come back. There were also Tejanos inside of the Alamo that fought alongside the Texians. There's only 8 of those listed among the 189, and there had to be more than that, in my opinion, inside the Alamo. And so I was trying to come up with a way that, okay, how would I incorporate these voices or these stories that have not been told into my book? And I did that through a narrator, the old man, just like me, who believes that he is being contacted by the voices of the dead who were actually participating in that siege and battle from both sides, both Mexican and the defender side. And they want him to realize what happened, what the actual conditions were, and to incorporate those into the Alamo story so that the entire story can be told. And that was the angle that I took on the book, which I thought was different and unique.
Can I ask if maybe what's next for Max, or do you have any projects you're, if not working on, at least thinking about?
Yes, I am. I had it pointed out to me by more than one individual, Lauren Steffi being the primary person, but that Llano Estacado ends with an opening for a sequel. He has found his purpose in life, but that story is yet to be told. So I have been doing research lately on Texas Rangers during this period, the key cases that they were involved in, the criminals that were involved in it. And so I'm looking to incorporate him into that timeline and those stories and carry his story forward.
Max, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if any of our listeners wanted to reach out to you on social media, what would be the preferred platform you would send them to?
To learn more about me and my books, and actually all of the discussions I've had surrounding my books, I would point you toward wordpress.com, where I have a blog, Max Knight at wordpress.com. I also would point you to Stoney Creek Publishing.com, because my bio is in there, as well as the synopsis of my last 2 books. And then, of course, Amazon.com. If you would look up, and this is key, that you look up Max L. Knight, because I use my middle initial in publishing. So if you were just to use Max Knight, you would not find any details on me or my books. But if you use Max L. Knight at Amazon.com, you will also find background information on me and everything I've written.
Max, I wanted to thank you again for coming up from San Antonio, and I look forward to your next work, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Look forward to it. Thank you.